All right, good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Marisa and the ASIS student chapter at SJSU for inviting me to give a talk about research methods, which is a required course in our curriculum. And I am the course coordinator, so this is really a great opportunity for me to introduce this course to people who are about to take it, who haven't taken it yet, because we do have a wide range of options in terms of this course, a wide array of sections with different focuses. So this is a great opportunity for me to introduce them to you and to answer any questions you may have. Okay, the reason that we're having this course as a required course in our curriculum is because research methods, the knowledge of research methods is valuable. A few years ago, I did a study among over 500 library and information professionals to find out about their perceptions of the research methods education they had in their master's program. And 80% of them responded positively that taking the research methods course was helpful and that they were able to use the knowledge learned from that class to enhance their work. And the helpfulness was exemplified in three major aspects, as you can see listed on the slide here. First, taking the research methods course helps them better understand the LIS research literature, critically evaluate published research findings, and to properly apply them at work. There's a lot of published literature on various library and information topics, and we have to be able to critically evaluate the findings reported in those literature and create a determine if they are valid and reliable and how to properly use them at work. For example, you're working at the library and your library wants to create a presence on Facebook to better connect with the user community, and you're tasked to peruse the literature and to find out how other libraries' Facebook attempts have turned out. And some of the libraries have published survey studies they did to examine users' use and the perception of the library presence on Facebook. And as you're reading the literature, you're reading the studies, you need to be really mindful about the design of the survey, such as what questions they asked, to whom the survey was administered, etc. And also how the collected data was analyzed, so that you can decide whether the findings are reflecting how users use the library on Facebook and whether these findings are useful to you. And secondly, taking the research methods course helps the professionals develop a better understanding of research literature in other fields, and therefore they can better evaluate its value to their patrons' information needs and to assist patrons in their research process. This primarily applies to those who provide information services to people such as reference librarians. For example, if you are a government information librarian, you probably have to often assist the patrons with census and the statistical information. And having knowledge in research methods can really help you better evaluate statistics and the other research literature in order to assist the patron in their research and information seeking process. And finally, research methods education helps the professionals identify problems at work and produce reliable and valid data to solve the problems and to facilitate the decision-making process. As a library and information professional, you can't always rely on the published literature to gather information. Oftentimes, you have to plan and conduct studies to generate new information to help you solve problems. For example, let's say you are a school librarian and you need to justify the value of having a school librarian because the school district is considering cutting the position due to budget crisis. What you can do is to find out if having a school librarian is positively related to students' performance. And knowledge you learned from the research methods class can help you design such a study to collect data and analyze data and eventually give you an answer about the relationship between the presence of a school librarian and the students' academic performances. So you can see that the research methods course is basically a course that teaches us problem-solving skills, and as this information and the library professionals attested to in my study. And hopefully their affirmative voice can make you see this course, research methods course, in a more positive light rather than just another required course you have to take. So this is sort of like the background to give you an understanding of why we're making this course a required course in our curriculum, why it's valuable to take the research methods course. And I have already published the study in Library and Information Science Research. If you're interested, I can send you a citation to my article so that you can read more about the study and the findings about the value of and the benefits of research methods education. And right now, I am involved in a project called the Institute of Research Design for Librarianship. So if you Google it, if you just Google IRDL, the initials, you will be able to visit the website of this project. It is a 3-year project that provides professional development training for academic librarians to enhance their research skills, to enhance their knowledge of research methods. This project is funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, so it's federally funded, and every summer from 2014 to 2016, a group of academic librarians are selected from around the country to gather at Loyola Marymount University Library in Los Angeles to have a 2-week, actually it's a 9-day training program on research methods. So as you can see, the value of research methods has been recognized by the federal funding agency in the field of library and information science. Apparently, people are taking notice. They're realizing how important it is for our professionals to be equipped with the essential knowledge and the skills of conducting research and evaluating research findings. There are 2 concepts I think it's very important to make known before we go on, which is the difference between primary research and secondary research. Can anybody tell me the difference between the 2 of them, primary research and secondary research? If you want to give it a try, you can type up your answer through the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Yes, Marisa?
Hi. Okay. So I guess primary research, could it be something that you're I'm just gonna guess. Would it be something that you're like, I guess, already involved in, and then secondary research would be something you're researching something else, like you were saying about Facebook, like you would look up other studies from somewhere else?
Yes, definitely the gist of it. Primary research is the kind of research you do to gather original data to produce original information that doesn't exist yet. However, secondary research is the kind of research that you do to analyze and synthesize research that already exists, the published literature, for example. And just like the Facebook example that I gave previously, you don't have to do a study yourself. Instead, you can just look at the published literature and find out how other libraries have been using Facebook so that you can draw ideas from their research studies. However, if you are to find out about services and programs at your own library, how your own users are perceiving them and using them, for example, you have a library Facebook page and you're interested in understanding whether the social media, this kind of marketing has been bringing people to the library, and then you'd have to engage in primary research to design a study and to find out whether the social marketing is having the intended effect. So that's the difference between primary research and secondary research. Looking at the chat window here, Laura and Maria, it seems like you both answered the question correctly as well. That's very good. It's just a very important distinction to make. I'm sure that so far, if you haven't taken the research methods course yet, you probably already have had opportunities in your other courses to at least engage in secondary research, right? At least I know in 200 you probably have to write a paper, a position paper on the topic, and then you'd have to look at the literature, have to retrieve the literature, evaluate the literature, synthesize it to make an argument. So that kind of secondary or literature research, you probably have already done it. But taking the research methods course, you will be able to develop a more solid knowledge base of primary research, the various methods that you can use to conduct research to generate original data. So here on the slide, what you see is a basic description of the research methods course, such as the learning outcomes and the core competencies. There are three prerequisites for 285 research methods, 200, 202, and 204. You have to take these first three foundational courses before you can take 285. And there are four key learning outcomes for 285, and these learning outcomes are the same for all the different sections of 285. The very first one is to understand the difference between primary and secondary research, and then you have to be able to demonstrate knowledge of fundamental principles and the process of conducting research. This is important because conducting research is not something that that's something arbitrary. You have to do it through a deliberate process of designing and implementing a research study. You have to be clear about your research objectives, your research question, and how to design a research study to gather data that could exactly answer that research question. Because I've seen study that starts out with a certain research objective and then somehow ended up with a completely different study gathering data that just couldn't answer the research question at all, because there's no process, no principles applied in designing the study. And that's something we try to avoid when we are doing our own research. That's why we're listing that as one of the learning outcomes. We have to understand the components of conducting a research study so that we are making sure the data we are gathering exactly answers our research question, exactly accomplishes our research objectives. And then the third learning outcome, is to articulate the research methods covered in the course, appropriately apply them, and understand their strengths and liabilities. There are so many research methods out there: qualitative research methods, quantitative research methods, survey, focus group interview, observations, and so on and so forth. And they all have advantages and disadvantages. The key is to understand what their advantages and disadvantages are. So when we are presented with different problems or scenarios, we know which method to choose, which method to use that's the most appropriate one to address that scenario. And finally, understand appropriate data collection and analysis tools and ethical concerns related to research. It's important for us to understand how to use each data collection tool. For example, even if we know that survey is the proper research method in this case to address this problem, how are you going to design a meaningful survey is a whole different story. Sometimes people know that survey, okay, yeah, it's the right way to do it. We have to use survey because, given the nature of the problem, survey is the right method. And then they end up designing a survey that's just totally useless, that's not gathering data that can be useful. So we have to understand the nuts and bolts of how to design a meaningful survey questionnaire to gather the data we need to solve the problem, to answer the research question. And of course, a lot of times in our research, we have to involve human beings, and then there are ethical concerns involved. So we have to make sure that we're engaged in ethical research conduct. So these are the 4 learning outcomes. And then the core competency that's addressed by 285 is competency L. Demonstrate understanding of quantitative and qualitative research methods and of the evaluation and the synthesis of research literature. So it's important to note this, so that after you take 285, you probably have a e-portfolio folder set aside already, and you can move everything related to, or everything from 285 just under your subfolder competency L. Do you all have a e-portfolio folder created already for your 285? Yeah. Yeah. And then everything 285 related should go under Comp L. And the link here on the slide is the link to the 285 topical page. This page contains information about the different sections of 285. As I mentioned earlier, we do offer a wide array of 285 sections with different focuses. So if you follow the link on this page, you'll be able to visit the different topics of 285. And I will go through these topics one by one tonight, so that you will get a basic sense of what they are, what these sections are about, and how to choose them properly based on your own professional and academic interests. The first 285 section I'd like to introduce to everyone is the general overview section. This section covers the research methods frequently used in conducting library and information science research. The other 285 sections, they more or less have a focus. The focus is either a particular type of research method, or a particular research purpose, or a particular research domain. However, the general overview section doesn't lean any way. It's just a general overview. So if you are unsure about your own professional pursuits, if you are not clear about your which career pathway you will be following, this might be your choice. Or if you are considering writing a thesis instead of completing 289, the e-portfolio, this is something to consider. This section covers the organic process of conducting research, starting from recognizing the research problem to writing a proposal to propose a research study, and of course everything in between. We do have quite a number of faculty members teaching this topic. Jeffrey Liu, myself, Chris Hagar, Frank Savant, and Joanna Tannen. Jeffrey and Chris and myself, we have been teaching this section for a long time, but I have recently switched to a different focus, so I no longer teach this section. But Frank Savant, and he's a new instructor, and he's teaching this section for the very first time this semester. And if you're interested, you can certainly look at green sheets of this section from all these instructors and look at the structure of the course and the assignments they have and the readings they assign to get a better understanding of how each instructor is teaching this section. And then you can choose the instructor or, you know, the one that you like most, you feel interested in most. So that's the general overview section. Any questions so far about this section or about anything else? Okay, if not, we're gonna keep going. And then we have a section on youth services. This is an introduction to research methods with a focus on the issues surrounding research that involves youth. So if you are interested in pursuing a career that has something to do with youth services, for example, if you want to become a public librarian that specializes in youth programming or providing services to the youth, you probably want to consider this section. As you can see, one of the topics covered in this section is how to apply program evaluation to youth service programs through applied research. Youth program evaluation seems to be something a lot of my students are interested in. Although I don't teach this particular section, I've had students in my 285 classes that are interested in evaluating youth programs and how the programs are being used by people and their awareness of the programs, and also how they have been using the youth section of the library website. And there are various topics on youth program evaluation I have seen in my 8 years of teaching 285. So I think it's really great that this topic is covered and emphasized in youth services. And the instructors teaching this course are Anthony Bernier, Marianne Tarlin, and Joanne DeGroot. They're all youth services experts. Any questions about youth services? Okay. And then the next section is about program evaluation and the service evaluation. So evaluation research is a particular type of research. It's more like a research purpose. The purpose is to evaluate programs and services to conduct evaluation. And the focus of this section is to look at research methods often used when evaluating and assessing services in public, academic, and other types of information environments. This is something that's really practical because nowadays libraries are really big on assessment, especially in academic libraries. I think ACRL, the Association of College and Research Libraries, they have a portal, web portal called The Value of the Library, something like that. It's all about assessment, and they have a collection of articles on library assessment on their portal, and so if you're interested, you can check it out. I'm using this example to demonstrate to you how important it is to understand the process of evaluation. And if you look at the topics covered here, the very last one, how to propose a project to evaluate a real or imagined library service or program, noting the types of data to be gathered, the types of analysis to be performed, the overall picture of the service that this data and analysis will reveal, and how such a program evaluation will be informative and useful to all the stakeholders. So that is a pretty succinct description of how an evaluation study should be done and what's involved in it. So this is a very practical course if you're interested in understanding service and the program evaluation. And action research. Oh, I forgot to talk about the instructors teaching this course. Cheryl Stenstrom, she's the person that teaches this course, this section regularly, and Frank Savant, and he's new, and I believe he taught this course once in the summer, in 2014, last year. He might be teaching the section again. But anyways, these are the two instructors teaching this section. And action research. Renee Jefferson is the only person teaching action research, but it's a very popular section, and because because action research, the sound of it, it sounds so real, right? And action research, it's both a process of research and a process of solving problems and making changes, addressing issues, improving practices. So it is a process of inquiry that's conducted both by and for those that are taking actions. It's often used in organizational development. And basically, the study subjects themselves are the researchers. I guess that's why it's so exciting about action research, and why the course is very popular. And this is something that if you are really into public services, this is something you might be considering, because if you want to make your services and programs better, and in the research process you can really engage the users of those services and programs and make them the actors, make them those that can take actions in the process. If you want to, if you're facing a change situation where changes have to be made, you can involve them, because whatever the change is, however the change turns out, it's going to be the users, the library users, that will be receiving the services that will be impacted by the change. So they involving them in the action research process, making them part of the collaborative research process is really beneficial. So if you are really into public services or organizational development, if that's something that you have your mind set on, then you might consider taking this particular section. And survey research. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've recently switched focus from teaching the general overview section of 285 to something else, and this is the something else I've been teaching. I started teaching survey research last semester, and this is my second semester teaching it. So far, I believe it's quite well received, well, at least based on my thoughts. And students seem to like it because it's practical, and it's about how to conduct a survey, to solve problems, to gather data. Survey is certainly one of the most frequently used methods in library and information science research. It's very easy to use. A lot of people use it, and one of the things at the beginning of the semester my students and I talked about was survey fatigue, actually, because survey, especially online survey, it's just everywhere. People get tired of receiving them and having to complete the questionnaire, and it's everywhere. It's so easy, so accessible. But it doesn't mean that it can be done that easily and well. No, it takes a lot of work to design a meaningful and well-constructed survey questionnaire, and that's why I think it warrants a special section of our research methods curriculum to just focus on survey research, survey design, how to design a meaningful, reliable, and valid survey questionnaire, how to conduct a survey study that's gathering useful data. Because I've seen so many poorly designed survey questionnaires, I think I have to raise people's awareness about the importance of doing survey studies the right way, instead of just, create an account on SurveyMonkey and whip up a survey questionnaire in 10 minutes. That's just not the way to do it, but still people do it that way. And that's something I try to fight against, and try to, through this course, try to make my students become conscious researchers that understand the process of conducting good survey research. Okay, so that's survey research. And so far, I'm the only person teaching this course. And historical research and writing. This section explores the ways in which historians frame research questions, assess literature, and locate and use primary and secondary sources, and formulate viable and worthwhile research projects. Basically, if you have an interest in history and to do research from the historical perspective, and or if you want to do comparative historical research to compare historical events and to draw conclusions from your comparisons, this is your section. This is something. This is the section you probably want to consider. And the instructors for this section are Debbie Hansen, Anthony Bernier, and Timothy Dickey. And again, they're all experts on historical research. Debbie and Anthony, I think their PhD degrees are in history, so that's how much of an expert they are. Ethnography. Ethnography is a type of qualitative research. It's a research process that involves the study of people and cultures, especially from the perspective of the study subjects themselves. And Dr. Kristen Redman is the instructor of this course, and she's the only person teaching ethnography. And her section, her ethnography section, has a technology focus because she's using Blackboard Collaborate, the synchronous learning system, as a sort of a technology-mediated laboratory to have students learn and apply qualitative field methods. And so if you have an interest in qualitative research, you might consider taking this course. Because I think this is the only 285 section that has a qualitative research focus. And assessment of information literacy instruction. Information literacy instruction is an important component of academic librarianship. So if you're interested in academic librarianship, particularly if you want to become an instructional librarian, this is your 285 section pretty much, because information literacy assessment is an essential element of information literacy instruction. And this section will cover the methods that you need to know and you need to master in order to conduct assessment, to monitor and improve student learning, as well as to meet external requirements. Because information literacy right now is being incorporated into the undergraduate education curriculum. So there are accrediting bodies that will look at how information literacy is assessed, and that's also covered in this course, and the different methods that you can use to assess information literacy instruction. And Peter Wellstead is the instructor for this course. And grant writing, again, here's another very practical course. This course will focus on needs assessment and the writing grant applications. If you work at a library, you might find yourself in a position where you will have to identify the local library needs and identify sources of money that could fund a project or a program to meet that library needs. A lot of times, a library doesn't necessarily have the budget to address a particular library need. Then you'd have to locate external money to fund, to support that activity or that program. And then you'd have to have the capability to write grant applications. We have some funders in our field that libraries often submit grant applications to, like the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or the California State Library has grant programs that provide funding for public libraries. I've known libraries that have received the funding to support programs like the Makerspace, to fund their 3D printers, and to create a digital storytelling station. So actually, one of my students this semester in my research methods class, he's working at Sunnyvale Public Library, and their library received the funding to support the Makerspace program, so they have a 3D printer. And now he's proposing, in my class, he's proposing a survey research study to evaluate that program. And especially from the staff's perspective, how they're thinking about this program, because when the grant money runs out, they'd have to come up with ideas or funds to keep it going, if that's what they decide to do. And he will be able to draw ideas from his survey study. So that's grant writing, and Joanna Fountain is the instructor that teaches this course. And records management and archival science. This section provides an overview of the research methods within the context of archives and records centers. So if you want to become a records manager, or if you're interested in archival science, you may consider this section. And the instructor, Jason Kaltenbacher, I'm not so sure how to pronounce his last name. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. But anyways, he's the instructor teaching this course. Okay, I believe that's all the different 285 sections we're currently offering. And here on the slide, you will be able to see the simple 4-step process that I have summarized for you to make your decision on which 285 section to take. First of all, I strongly recommend that you take 285 as early as possible, because the knowledge learned from 285, I find it really useful even when you are still taking classes. But given the value of the knowledge, I recommend that you take it as early as possible. That's actually something that I've learned from my students. A few years ago, I did a survey among all the students who had taken 285, and that was one of the suggestions they made. Some of the students, they regretted that they had not taken 285 soon enough. Instead, they waited till their very last semester to take 285, and they regretted that because they found the knowledge from 285 very valuable, and they would have benefited from that when they were taking other courses had they taken 285 early enough. So that's a recommendation based on my previous students' feedback. And then it's important to review the 285 information page to look at the variety of topics offered and to just get a basic understanding of the different topics. And then you can identify a few topics that interest you so that you can do a little more in-depth investigation about each one of these topics. So you can look at the green sheets of the different sections to see the assignments, the readings, and other things and the instructor provides on the green sheet. So that will give you a pretty good idea of what's covered in that particular section of 285. And then check the rotation schedule, because not every section is offered every semester. So if there's a section that you really want to take, it's important for you to know when that's offered so that you can make plans accordingly. And then you may want to consult peers who have taken the sections that you're interested in, and then you can ask for their feedback. Finally, you can consult your advisor for feedback and for suggestions. And at last, based on all the investigation you've done, you should be able to decide on the section of 285 to take rather easily. So that's the process. Any questions so far? Okay, no questions? You know, if you have any questions about any specific section of the 285, I can certainly address your questions about the sections I personally teach, like the general overview and the survey research, those two sections. But for the other sections, if you have questions and you couldn't get your answer from reviewing the green sheets, you can always contact the instructor. You can send them an email and ask them about their particular 285 sections. Okay, Marisa, looks like you had a question.
Yes, hi, I have a question. I actually tried to type out the link that you have from the last slide of current student courses for Library 285 topics and information. And for some reason, I kept getting this page doesn't exist. So I don't know if maybe I typed it wrong. Okay. I will try to click on the link that you posted on chat box right now.
Yeah, the link I posted to the chat box, that's the link to the 285 information page where you will get an overview of the various topics. Hopefully, you will have no problem accessing this link. But if you do, just let me know and I will contact IT support. Oh, it's working, that's great. All right. Okay then, hopefully after today's talk, you are feeling more, comfortable and confident about taking the 285 Research Methods course, because I know some people don't necessarily feel, because the nature of the research methods, they don't they don't think it'll be fun to take the research methods course, but it really can be, as you can see from the smiley cat in the picture here. Okay, any other questions? Well, since I am the coordinator for 285, if you have questions about this course, just email me. If I couldn't answer your question myself, I can always refer you to somebody else who can answer your question, okay? And here's my contact information at the end. And Marisa, I just saw your moderator message about IRDL. Let me find you the correct link.
Also, everybody, before you leave, if you please fill out the survey form that I put in the chat box to let us know what you thought of tonight's session. Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you everybody for coming for the talk tonight. I